Thank you all for making it today. Why don't we go around the room and identify ourselves? Bob Connors, Chairman.
John Keller, Secretary.
Martha Taylor.
John Lucy.
Mike Riley, police chief.
Steve Therrien, Vertex OPM.
Okay. So we're here to just finalize that due diligence and make a final recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. Steve has, I think first and foremost, I think we've done a very in-depth and thorough review of low bidder and the second bidder. And I think a lot of good work has been done. Steve, I'm gonna let you jump in. If you turn to tab 2, you'll see the communications that Steve had sent in.
So there were a few things. I had several conversations with Michael Cresta. Mike Cresta is the president of BC Construction. He was available each time I called, and I think I spoke with him 3 times since we were here last, the other day. First, I had enclosed a couple of letters, but to go along with the memo that John Lemieux and I created. If you go into tab 2, into the memo with the Vertex heading on it, I can take you through what we did. If I find that spot there. So the design team, as you heard the other day, went through and did some diligence on several, or say 4 specific projects that they researched. They had some comments that they mentioned during the meeting the other day. After the meeting that we had, they sent the comments out in written form. And what I did with those comments is I literally copy pasted exactly what was sent to me. And that's what I have inserted into this memo. So for example, the first one where it says a Weston Housing Renovations TBA Architects, there are the context due diligence comments received, and as you know, those aren't context comments on the project. They're the comments they received through their diligence with TBA Architects, for example, and we can go through each one, but it's all set up the same way. So what I did with these, in speaking with Mike Cresta, so I told him what the purpose of the call was, which was to perform some diligence on some project information that we had received as part of the diligence for the Newbury contract. I told him the project name and the architect who worked on the project, and I read word for word the comments that were provided and asked Mike to, if there was anything else we needed to know or learn about his view of the project in response to the comments. And as you can see on the first, and typically to generalize, the architectural comments were pretty similar. There was poor project management, scheduling kinds of comments. That was consistent throughout. There were some, others, but generally that was the criticism and concern. And first, Mike, and I don't know Mike, these are my first conversations with him. Vertex has done projects with him, as John mentioned the other day. I have not, and did not speak, or had not spoken with Mike before. Very courteous. As you know, we said with these comments some very unflattering things, and he was extraordinarily courteous and responsive, and was thankful for the opportunity to respond to these comments. So generally, he didn't respond item by item. Generally, he said, you have to speak to the owner. The owner will say things very different from this. Generally, that's what he said, and I'll go into more detail with what I provided here. The contractor's side, which is Mike provided, was there were a tremendous number of change orders, for example, on this Weston housing project, and often what a contractor will say, and this isn't pejorative, is that, look, we don't create the change orders. We don't create the issues that are on the project that aren't reflected in the drawings. We find them, and in response to what we find, we submit things. So, and I'm not new in this business. One way to look at that is contractors will either have an art of finding those issues and having the paperwork submitted before you even get back to the office, or working through a lot of them and the egregious issues they submit. One of the interviews that I had, a phone interview with one of the owners, said they did so many extra things on this project and they were not gouging at all. That was the kind of response and description that they had of the project, so.
Steve, if I may, I think I would just go over general terms, open up to questions.
Okay.
I mean, I have to say the March 29th, 2019 letter from the Board of Selectmen Town of Norfolk, the very front page
Yep.
of tab 2, police station, really kind of sums it up pretty well for current event, so that's a project that,
March 29th, 2019.
Yeah.
As you said, there was a town Norfolk letter that was, it would be our pleasure in conclusion to provide you with any further references you may require. Thank you for the job well done.
If I can speak to that a little bit, before we came here today, I called Norfolk PD, spoke with Deputy Chief Carroll, who was listed on there, and the Deputy Chief there said he had a background in building and construction, so he was on the job every single day. He said the problems that Norfolk PD ran into, and they went almost $2.5 million over budget in almost a year delayed. He said none of it, in his opinion, had to do with the builders themselves. It was poor plans, very poor sub-bid specs and things like that. And they were, he said the town, and a poor OPM. The OPM got fired halfway through the job and they had to bring somebody new in. So they went through, the town bought a shell of a building and they were gonna convert that into a new police station. And while they were planning that, they got a $4 million grant from the state for a regional dispatch center. And so the police station is downstairs in this building and the dispatch center is upstairs. And part of the problems with that building is, in the architectural plans, they didn't factor in the extra weight from the regional dispatch center, so they had to add new columns and new support beams in during the project, which threw the HVAC people off, through, you know, and I'm
the
Oh,
whole
not,
floor plan,
yeah, exactly. So, he also said that the specs in the bid specs were very generic in spots and left a lot of interpretation. Like, this building had an existing roof on it, but the roof didn't meet the specs that are needed for the regional dispatch and for a police station. So, but there was nowhere in the bid specs that determined who was responsible for that. So that was one thing they went to arbitration for, and the arbitrator said the bid specs are so vague, I have no idea. So they awarded the contractor, awarded arbitration to the contractor, but not in the amount of money he was looking for. But Deputy Chief Carroll said that they didn't get whacked with change orders. They said in any building there are gonna be change orders, but the contractor didn't try to nickel and dime them, and actually took a lot of the changes on himself and didn't issue change orders and just ate the cost of it. So he said he'd recommend them very, very vigorously. It was a ringing endorsement. I was pleasantly surprised. So.
And you couple that with the Board of Selectmen, who ultimately had to answer for the additional monies in the overrun time. I think they all concluded where the real weak link was on that particular project.
Yeah, he said if your plans are tight and your bid specs are tight, you shouldn't have an issue. I mean, other than normal things that come up during a construction project. But.
Yeah. Well, we just go right around. John, you've had a chance to look at all this stuff. You got any questions for Steve?
No, I don't have any questions for Steve. I was a little, in reviewing all the concerns, I was very concerned, because there seemed to be a consistent thread throughout it all. But again, if you're gonna boil it right down and look at an apples to apples type of project, the closest thing we have to look at is Norfolk. And the conversation that the chief had with the deputy chief, who was, you know, in the trenches throughout the whole thing, from my understanding, that swayed me to be more.
What deputy chief so far?
Yeah, I think that's what, yeah, so I'll be spending some time talking to him, I'm sure, in the future.
I did tell him that if the project, we're lucky enough for the project to go through, that he can schedule the next year and a half of his life overseeing a building, so.
His second greatest love.
Yeah.
Heavy equipment. Martha, how about yourself?
Yeah, kind of the same. I mean, going through these comments, I was a little concerned that Mike didn't seem to be addressing the issues, at least in the summary, kind of point by point.
Right.
You know, rather than saying, yes, we had, you know, we didn't have a great team on that project, we did have management issues, you know, we're rectifying them. It seemed like most of the references were just talk to the owner, talk to the owner. But hearing what Mike's conversation was and some of the other comments, it seems like they seem like a responsible bidder.
John, what's your take on it?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised to hear, you know, what you guys had come up with, because it was the other side of the story. I'd have to say, I would have to give him a vote of confidence, especially talking to the owners, or like talking to the chief, assistant chief, and just reading the one from the courthouse, you know. Sounds like Mike does hang around the job a lot. And I liked one of your comments is that they're self-performing on their site work, kind of like what LD Russo would be doing if they were here. And that kind of gives you some control right out of the chute for your site work to get underway. So.
Okay, I think, so Steve, I think at the end of the day, on your page 4, you came in with a conclusion.
You know, we, in evaluating the references that we spoke with and tracked down, we find them to be a responsible bidder.
I had a chance to go on their website. I was actually, it was pretty impressive. They are certainly not a new company. They've been around 30 years. And they do a lot of state, federal, and municipal work, and probably still some private work. But the website, they're very capable of building a building. I think from a Steve standpoint, keeping the paperwork up to snuff will just be something to keep on the front burner. But once you know that, it makes it a little bit easier. The other thing too, the company is a disabled veteran-owned small business, and they're certified as such.
So, yeah.
Which, they added all up, but. So what's our pleasure? So here's what we're faced with tonight, team. We've got to finalize our recommendation. There is a 6 o'clock Board of Selectmen's meeting in which we're going to, I'm going to take these all back from you because I need them for them. But no, not yet. And so we need to make a determination. So if you go to tab 1, you'll see one of 2 scenarios. And the first scenario is recommending that we go with we recommend to the Board of Selectmen that we go with the low bidder. That certainly after all our due diligence, and I'm glad we actually reached out to the contractor for his response, and certainly was a very thorough review. Or if we have questions, we can look at going with the number 2 bidder, but that's an additional cost of, I'm gonna round it up to $200,000 more. In your packet, what I did is I put in all of the due diligence. If you wanna review, tab 3 is the actual, his certificate of contractor eligibility, which gives you his filed subbids amounts. Again, it's just more for the record. Tab 4 is just the updated schedule of probable costs. But the executive summary memo kind of picks it all up. Picks up schedule, picks up the bullet points there. So Steve, in talking to both you and John, do you certainly have no problem working with BC Construction. Steve, is it Steve?
Theron,
No, but who was it Steve Kirby? Who-
Steve Kirby,
Did they work with BC?
yes, Steve Kirby worked with BC, yes,
Steve?
yes, in
Okay.
Foxborough.
Yep. And so I'm looking at this from my standpoint. I don't see where a case has been made to spend another couple of $100,000. And when I look at the clock, the bids came in, they landed on the 10th of October. So your 30 business days or 45 working days, that gives you to about November 20th. We're going to town meeting for consideration November 12th. If a protest was filed by the low bidder, or I don't think anyone else could file a protest, I don't think we could resolve a protest before the time clock would expire on the 30 business days. And we could then reach out if we decided not to go a little bidder, to see if the second bidder would hold his price and all the filed sub bids. Or you could be faced with rebidding the whole project. So, I think those are all of the issues and angles that we're faced with.
And if we did a rebid at this time of the year, it'd be sometime late January, because you wouldn't get anything in December.
Historically, I don't see us saving any money on a rebid unless you were going to do a major revamp on something or your plans. And then the cost of doing that and the delay would certainly negate. I think, Steve, rebidding, have you ever seen the numbers come in better? In the recent times,
No, and you typically need a change in scope
Right.
to justify a rebid.
yeah. So,
It seems if we're all comfortable with the bid structure, if we're comfortable with the design, we're comfortable with the OPM, any of the shortcomings that we were concerned with are already addressed. So if our confidence level is high with all the other mitigating circumstances, then BC should be fine.
for me, the Board of Selectmen for the town of Norfolk, that being so recent in the recent project, on what sounds like was a troubled project, but they weren't holding him responsible. It was a comedy of errors on others, so.
So we're looking for a motion to opt in on one or two?
Do we have a motion to recommend to the Board of Selectmen the low bidder BC Construction?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, is anyone taking notes for minutes?
I can.
I see Martha writing.
Right,
Okay.
oh, she's doing it.
I can pass
You
them
can
on
take
to
over.
you.
You can take it over.
Sorry.
All right. Any further
You're used to
discussion?
doing this.
I'm very confident after Steve's invest in my conversation that, as long as we're confident our bid specs are concise enough and clear enough, and, our architecture and engineering, we're confident in that. I think staying on top of the procedure, having somebody there just about every day, I think it would be senseless to not go with a low bidder. We've worked really hard to save as much money as we can, and, $200,000 is a lot of money, and I feel very good about the low bidder.
We will have somebody full-time from them, that's Clerk of the Works,
Oh, nice.
doing that kind of policing of what goes on.
Well,
And you can
he
go
could
ahead.
haunt a house, I'm gonna make sure he's over there just about every day.
Well, we can save some money, let him be. So that we'll have that should be covered. I don't think you guys.
This is not a very complex project. This is a
Well, for
big
me it
house.
is, because I have no
Well,
basis.
it-
For you guys, not so much, so.
And even the cell conditions is not extraordinary. The depths are not to the point that they're overcoming for the general contractors to handle. But Martha, what do you think? You've been on both sides of this hot potato with chasing change orders, chasing all the documentation?
I have, and I think, I was a little concerned, but I think getting the recommendations, and especially after the chief's discussion with the deputy chief at Norfolk, you know, I don't see that there would be any cause not to go with the low bidder.
Okay.
That makes sense to me, and I think it will be good to have sort of 24/7, well, not 24/7, but, you know, daily presence with the OPM and just keeping an eye on things, and if anything seems to start to be going south, to catch it quickly. And
All right, well, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. All right, well, let's move on to the next order of business is town meeting STM presentation. I had asked Zell and Jeff to provide the thought was having these be attached to the finance committee's handout, so that those in attendance would have something to be able to follow along. The only other thing we would do is we would attach the memo to the Board of Selectmen for VC Construction would be the cover to this. Let's go right around the table. Any thoughts, John? What do you think? Is too much, not enough?
So I think more than just a simple update, I think a brief on what's transpired since the last town meeting, which everybody kind of picks up on and can. And then really just get into the review that we've done to make sure this is the right contractor. It may be along the way some comments about why we chose to do things or why we chose to do the alternates. I think that's, we established that a long time ago, is that to try and keep this close to the 6.5 or at 6.5, we needed some alternates, and we needed, one of them needed to be substantial to help us get back there. I think your ability to present what's been going on in the bidding and construction community, it's everywhere, going all over the place. I have another job this size, it's even high, 3 times higher than this one, coming in on budget. So it's.
Well, I think we sent a clear message at the annual town meeting that we can't control the public bid process, but we can manage the selection process. And I think we've done a good job on that. And if I was 10 years younger, I'd be getting into this public bid marketplace because it's pretty lucrative right now.
Mhm.
All right, so, I mean, we don't need a motion on that, but that's what's before us, it's part of the record. So what I'll do is I will turn this over to Tracy so it can be attached. I'll send it to her electronically. Now, certainly, the Board of Selectmen makes the final decision on this, so this is our recommendation. So if they decide, for whatever reason, to go in a different direction, then the other cover page is the one, in the alternative. And so I think at the town meeting, we posted that as a meeting for all of us, so that we can all speak, we can chat before, after, so we will have a quorum. I mean, I think, from my viewpoint, I'm proud of our town. Newbury's made a decision we need a standalone police station. They made a decision that it's gonna be on Morgan Avenue. The town has got its financial house in order where we have a AAA bond rating, and we've amassed $2.8 million in free cash. That doesn't just happen overnight. That's good governance, good management on the part of the town and our town leadership team. We can talk about this for another 4 years, or we can build something. I mean, that's kinda where I'm at on this. I think we put a lot of time and effort, and with a level of professionalism and expertise that most, honestly, most committees don't get with John's experience, Eric's experience, and me living on Plum Island. That's the only experience I bring to this, but it's been a good team. Working with the contracts, the drawings are very accurate. I'm gonna say they're in the 90 percentile of, completion. Where 85 is really the norm. And that's where you get that variance of 15% on a project that you try to fund, 7.5 of the 15. But, so, I think we'd be prepared to answer questions, but I think the short version of the presentation is probably best.
I agree.
Not that what do you think?
I agree.
Okay. What will happen is, these will be on the slides too. So when Susan is, it'll be up on the,
Screens.
yeah. The whole thing with doing our due diligence on low bidder and bidder, second bidder, that's just us being very, very thorough. The fact is, we've selected a responsible bidder, and it would be hard pressed if we tried not to. So I'm not thinking, we can certainly answer a question if it comes up, but I don't want anyone to overread our due diligence and the level of depth we went into. It's not often our town spends this kind of money on anything, so.
No, I think it was very appropriate.
All right, any other questions?
Nope.
All right, so our next meeting is town meeting,
Next Tuesday.
next Tuesday at 7 p.m. And we'll see what happens.
It's the worst that can happen. Wait another 4 years.
Eek, another couple.
You know what, I think we'll have a spirited discussion. At the end of the day, you either want to build something or you don't. And I think that's where it's going to come back to it.
I'm very happy and confident that we can stand before town meeting and say we've done everything we can to keep the scope and the price as low as possible, to be the least impactful on the taxpayers. And then it's just up to them, do they want to build something or don't they? And, pretty optimistic on this one.
Well,
I don't want to jinx anything, but I'm
Yeah,
pretty
we'll
optimistic
see.
on this one.
All right, a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Okay,
Second.
all in favor? Thank you.